Everyone, this is Ben Dean of MentorCoach, and today we're talking with Dr. Bryan Dik about his new MasterClass, Living a Calling in a Time of Pandemic and Change. So Bryan, welcome to the call.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
We're thrilled for you to be here, and for everybody, Bryan has a very extensive bio on our class website, but let me just say for now, he is professor of psychology at Colorado State University, widely recognized as one of the world's experts in the science and practice of helping people find and live their life calling. He's published extensively in the field, is co-founder of the CSU Applied Positive Psychology program, and much, much more. So Bryan, we're so excited you're here. And first question, what are the 3 or 4 main things you hope people will learn from your class?
Well, in addition to, obtaining the credentials that students can achieve from taking the course, I'd say 3 things. First, an up-to-date understanding of what we're learning from the science of meaningful work and work as a calling. Number 2, closely related to that, very practical, evidence-based tools for facilitating effective career coaching work with their clients, work that translates into real outcomes. And then number 3, super important, personal benefit. I always invite students to apply these concepts to their own lives. Right? I think a powerful way to learn is to take the content and experience what it looks like in your own life. So my goal for any course I facilitate, and certainly for this one, is for students to experience positive change. That's my hope and expectation.
Okay, and let me add, Bryan, if I may, one thing that is exciting to me as a coach and entrepreneur, which at least a subset of our viewers will be, I love how this will give students a much needed way to provide something clients are hungering for, but also for those students who are helping professionals or entrepreneurs, it gives you a ready-made profit sitter with the competitive advantage of Pathway U software, which we'll describe in a minute. Bryan is not here to push Pathway U, but I will mention that it is in the bank, tested and reliable, and they now have it at over 100 colleges and universities using it. And you have a huge advantage if you want to go into this field and really make this part of what you do for a living. Now for the backstory for the course. Bryan, the title of your first class session suggests that a sense of calling is needed now more than ever. Why is a calling needed now more than ever during a pandemic?
Well, the pandemic has created huge disruptions, obviously, in the way people work and in the opportunities that people have to work. Now, prior to the pandemic, we already knew that 2/3 of people reported they were disengaged in the job. Year after year, the annual Gallup poll tells us this. We also knew that the average 50-year-old prior to the pandemic had already held a dozen jobs. Change is the name of the game. That was already the case. What the pandemic has done is a couple of different things. First of all, it's caused massive unemployment. And second, it's poured gasoline on the pace of some of the changes that already had been happening within the world of work. The shift from stable, loyal employers to a gig economy, the role of technology in how we work, remote working, the Internet of Things, every job becoming a tech job, and then automation and the concern that robots are coming for all of our jobs. These were concerns already prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has hastened them. And so, we live in this world where change is the rule rather than the exception now more than ever. How do people cope with that? How much does it help to have a sense of purpose that's resistant to these kinds of changes, that in fact transcends a particular job title? That's what a sense of calling can do. It's very powerful, and it's something that can be harnessed in ways that really help people navigate all of these changes. And there's something else unique, I think, about where we stand at the moment. Even while these COVID-19 numbers that we're tracking can be very scary, we've got some good things happening in terms of vaccines. There's this sense of optimism, a sense that we are going to move past this pandemic at some point, probably starting in 2021. So it's a good time for people to take stock of things, to prepare for what lies ahead. And a lot of people are doing that in their lives and in their work, also setting some new goals for 2021. And so focusing on what it looks like to discern and live out a calling can offer some real help and guidance as people are doing this.
Now, you talk about the science of vocation and positive psychology. What exactly do you mean by that, and just how sciencey is this class?
Well, when I talk about science of vocation and positive psych, really there's three things I'm thinking about. When I talk about science of vocation, there's kind of two levels to it. One is research specifically targeting meaningful work and work as a calling. These are two of the fastest growing areas within applied positive psychology. So that's one element of it. And then the second is that work, the science of meaningful work and work as a calling, fits within this broader science of career choice and development. And then adding to that, positive psychology, the science of well-being, that intersects both of those things. And so for me, a scientist practitioner, I would just say if you're a coach, a counselor, an educator, a manager, or in some other type of applied practice, and you care about science, probably it's because you want to do what you know works. And that's a value to me. So while we will definitely spend time talking about the latest science on these things, I will often in the class pause and ask the question, this is very interesting, but so what? What difference does this make in the room in terms of how I work with clients or the people that I'm mentoring or groups? And then we'll focus on that question of application and, talk through what is this going to look like to take what we know from this science and then apply it through tested and, effective intervention strategies.
Okay, and how long does it take someone to develop a reasonable amount of mastery and comfort in using this so that they can really go in and help someone new?
Well, the starting point is probably different for different people based on their prior education and training. And so I would say my goal is to, move from wherever a client is or wherever a student is right now in terms of their own skill set to whatever the next step is. So for folks who are very skilled and have a broad repertoire of tools that are available to them for use in the room, that will be augmented and they'll have some additional ones. And for folks who are earlier on in their work with clients, it will provide some very practical, simple starting points for applying some of these things in the room with their clients.
Okay, here's a dumb question that kind of goes back over something you've already said, but I want to ask you anyway. So it's clear it can be a profit center for helping professionals. There's a widespread need for it. But what about students who also want to just help those who've been devastated by the pandemic, people who've lost family members and jobs? How does finding or living a calling benefit these sometimes traumatized people? Don't they really just most need money?
Sure they do. I mean, there is an immediate need for folks who are suddenly without resources. Absolutely. But I think taking the long view is important with anyone because it imparts a sense of hope. A sense of calling is something that transcends any particular job title. And so gaining some clarity in terms of, how I can express what makes me unique in ways that make the world better and thinking about all the different ways, pathways that I can pursue to achieve that helps people come to grips with the reality of their here and now, whatever that looks like. But it also allows them to develop a kind of a future focus and to set some goals that will sustain them, keep them motivated, and keep them hopeful and optimistic about the future.
And your experience, I'm asking, has shown you that this can be helpful to people throughout the socioeconomic strata, from people that are struggling and poor to people that are highly educated. These are common chords that are valuable for them.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this early on in the course. The second class session is specifically devoted to looking at questions of privilege and access to opportunity. A sense of calling is something that shows up in about equal proportion among people across the spectrum. But in terms of who is able to live out their callings. Obviously, there are some differences in terms of access to opportunity. And we'll talk about what that looks like when you're working with clients who have marginalized identities and who might have some real challenges in taking their idea of a calling and then living it out.
Okay, now you taught a spectacular class in 2015, very large class. It was so good that we extended it to let more people into it. How is this class different from that one?
Well, at the time we offered that class 5 years ago, research on calling was growing exponentially from fewer than 10 studies when I first did my first lit search on the concept to more than 100 at that time. But 5 years later, we're at over 600 studies in the research base. So there's a lot more to talk about. That exponential growth has continued. We'll also explore some new topics: diversity and the dignity of work, the necessity of building strategies for adapting and navigating change, what science tells us about succeeding in a job search, a little bit about retirement. These are things that we touched on and alluded to in 2015, but we'll be able to go into more depth on them this time around. We'll also use a live Zoom format, which gives us the flexibility for breakout rooms, maybe polls. It'll be a lot more interactive than the phone-based format that we used before.
Okay, now included in the cost of the tuition of the course is a lifetime account for each student with Pathway U. What in the world is Pathway U? Was it there in 2015? And what's so cool about it? What do you like about it?
Sure. Pathway U is an online career assessment system that I was privileged to help develop. In the 2015 course, I introduced an earlier, I think crude, looking back on it, version of what it is now. We called it Jobsology then. The company that developed Pathway U that I co-founded is called Jobsology, but the product is Pathway U. It's this dynamic, very user-friendly platform where someone can create a profile, take a series of highly efficient but also reliable and valid assessments to give them a snapshot of what makes them unique in terms of their interests and values and personality and so forth. And then we have some patented algorithms that takes that information and then recommends career paths on the basis of a person's unique profile, and then unleashes all kinds of curated information about those career paths in terms of types of training that's required, a day in the life, economic information about whether that field is expected to grow and so forth. And then there are a number of tools as well. There's a job search tool where we use those same algorithms to identify open jobs and sort them based on how well they fit and by where they're located. And a workbook that's associated with it that provides some opportunity to engage in some really deep reflection on results and what that means for a person's life and their career narrative. So it's something I'm super excited about. It's an empirically supported tool that folks can use. I will say this is not a selling from the stage situation, so I'm not going to force it down anyone's throat, but I will invite everyone to try it out for free and then see what that is like. And I'll focus on the principles that can be applied regardless of whatever your preferred tool is. You can use some of those same principles, but I think it's a powerful, very hands-on way to help people begin to discern what their calling might be.
Now, it's a relatively new tool, and what kind of acceptance has it had in the college and university community?
I mean, that's kind of what we've targeted is colleges and universities, their career centers. And right now we've got more than 100 colleges and universities across the country that are using Pathway U. So it's something that's definitely developed a foothold, and we're excited about our growth trajectory, and hopefully that'll be double in a year.
How hard is it for a person that's not tech savvy to learn how to use?
Super easy. You can access it on a computer, on a phone, on a tablet. It's designed to be user friendly. A lot of effort went into making it foolproof. So I don't think that'll be an issue at all.
Okay, and as a practitioner, I'll just add one thing about it is you'll have lifetime access to everything in Pathway U and all its developments. Your clients there is a fee for your clients, but we'll show you a way to pay a very nominal fee. And what our students do is they buy it for the client and gift it to them. So the client, it's seamless to the client. To the client, it appears to be free, but it's really a nominal fee. So very exciting. And finally, question about your new book, Redeeming Work. It's written for the faith community, but it's not a required text for this class. Yeah, is quote calling a religious concept, or is it relevant for anyone?
It's a great question. It emerged out of a religious tradition, but it's broadened and become mainstream. And we'll talk about this right out of the gate in the course. And so, for a class like this, we'll talk about its relevance across the board. It's something that's highly relevant for people, regardless of their faith tradition or non-faith perspective. And so that's where the focus will be. I personally am a person of faith. I have, never kind of kept that hidden. And Redeeming Work is a book that's written specifically for my faith community. But for this class, we'll talk about its broad applicability. And it will be a very inclusive, welcoming environment where you can kind of hold to whatever perspectives you most hold dear. And we'll talk about how that concept really transcends any one intellectual or religious perspective and is something that can be powerfully applied, I believe, to anyone.
And it's not a required text. And can you say something about the required text that you co-authored?
Sure. Make Your Job a Calling, a book I co-authored with my friend and colleague at University of Florida, Ryan Duffy. The book was really our first attempt to say, hey, there's all of this research that's accumulating in this field, vocational psychology, positive psychology, but so much of it is sort of in the ivory tower. It's read by other researchers, but it's not readily accessible to the people who would most benefit from applying it in the trenches, in their work with clients and in their own lives. And so it's a very, or the intent anyway, was to ensure that it's a very accessible book that is smart. It's focused on the research, but it's focused on the way the research applies to all of our lives. And so it breaks down the concept, its history, what research is telling us about it, and then how to apply it in our lives. So I'm excited to walk through elements of it with our students in this class.
It's something of a classic, and it's very easy to read. I think you'll enjoy it. Last question. Can you tell us something about yourself? I know some minor things, like you were a defensive back in high school and your first job was detasseling corn, but can you fill in the rest of the story, including what your own calling is?
Sure. Well, I mean, where to begin with a question like that? Tell us about yourself. It's why employment interviews usually start with that, right? It's like a projective. I'd say, I'm a normal guy. I'm married. I have 4 kids. They keep us very active. And I'm somebody who really tries to live this out. And part of that, the all this work about calling and you asked what my own calling is. I would say, if I had to distill it down, everything that I'm involved in, both my research at the university and teaching there, mentoring students, all the entrepreneurial stuff through Pathway U and Jobsology I've been involved in, all of it is really focused on helping other people understand what makes them unique and then identify ways to express that in the world in a way that hopefully makes the world better. If everybody is able to identify what really matters to them in life and then find ways through their work, through their other engagements in life, to kind of live that out, I think not only do all of those people flourish, but society as a whole does. That's something that's very important. And I think one of the big promises of this calling idea. But I also, part of why I'm interested in this is because it's part of my own story. I am someone who really obsesses about these questions. How can I use my gifts in a way that has optimal impact to the people around me and to the common good? And so, a lot of these same questions that students might be having are questions that I have, and my attempts to answer those questions when I'm talking through what the content is in the course, I'm inviting myself to apply that to my own life as well. And so, we're on a journey together, and I'm super excited starting early February to embark on this with everybody.
Okay, and I'll just say as a final word that Bryan's 2015 class got some of the highest evaluations we've had in 20 years. It was a fantastic class with videos, annotated PDFs, all kinds of materials. It was really great fun. So that's one of the reasons we're so thrilled that he's making another visit. So Bryan, thanks so much. This was tremendous and looking forward to the class.
Thank you, Ben. I am too.
Okay, take care. For more information on how to enroll in this limited edition class, head over to mentorcoach.com or search Google using MentorCoach and pandemic, and you'll find it. Hope to see you in class.